Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory be unto Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakar Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone that rule well. Peace, salutations, and blessings be unto the hopeful elect, pushing his truth in sincerity throughout the four corners of the globe, in the sincere hopes of being delivered in these last days. Alright, this is the brother Yakanan from the GMS England branch. And I wanna do this brief video, and inspiration is drawn from, this interview that I've been watching, over the past, few days. Sometimes you'll have, content, that you be watching, but the spirit doesn't exactly move you to do a video on it, in that same moment, so I've been kind of meditating and, watching clips here and there concerning this particular interview, featuring the Weeknd, all right, the Canadian, artist, the Weeknd. And basically he has, a new album out. I believe it's called Hurry Up Tomorrow. Yeah, Hurry Up Tomorrow. And to accompany that album, he also has, I believe it's like a short film, that goes with the album. You've had many artists that have done, things of that nature. I believe Prince done that with Purple Rain. There was a film that accompanied Purple Rain, the album. And basically, his source of inspiration for this short film, as you're going to hear, is his experiences with sleep paralysis. All right? Which I remember Elder Apostle Tahar, he done a video in regards to sleep paralysis, probably a good 4 or 5 years ago now. I remember that video quite well, very heavy video. And these are things that, we experience in this faith. You may have experienced it, in the world, but when you come into the truth, when you're illuminated with this wisdom, knowledge and understanding, you know exactly what you're experiencing. You know exactly what it is. And a lot of the time, it takes away the fear aspect of your experience. And I remember Elder Apostle Tahar, he said how, not to quote verbatim, but he said that he was pissed off, all right? That this spirit was troubling him. And I've experienced, sleep paralysis many times, where you're half awake, you're half asleep, and you can feel, an evil presence, within your room. And then, you utter the names Yahweh, why Yahweh Shai, you rebuke the spirit and it disappears. All right. So these things, are very real. And the last time I experienced it was probably about a year ago, I would say. About a year ago, half awake, half asleep. And I could feel an evil presence in the room. All right. So of course, you pray in the names Yahweh, why Yahweh Shai. But this time, I remember this spirit, actually grabbed my leg. And I was aware, that the spirit grabbed my leg. And I was like, what the fuck? You just get pissed off straight away. And it even came to the point, I woke up and my leg was still in the air. It was still kind of like levitating in the air. And that pissed me off even more. And I just started, repeating the names of Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, to rebuke the evil spirit, and then it left. So hey, these things are very, very real. All right, the spiritual aspect of this world, is in full effect. All right, but Esau would have you to believe that these things are just a result, of lack of sleep, so on and so forth, which the Weeknd is going to mention, in this video. But anyway, without further delay, let me play the clip, and then we'll go into, a few scriptures. All right. So as you can see, the question that was presented to him was, is there a dream that you've had in your life that came as a source of inspiration? All right. So he's about to answer that question.
I can answer that one. I mean, one of the main concepts of this film is sleep paralysis. Essentially, it's kind of like there are no antagonists in this film. I think that sleep paralysis is the enemy in the film, and then we reveal a few things after. But that is something that I was really dealing with, still am to this day. Not as much as before, but they're very vivid. They're very vivid nightmares. I don't know if anybody experiences it, but it's just you're in bed and you're awake, you're asleep but awake, half asleep, half awake, and you're aware of your surroundings, but you can't move. You're paralyzed for almost a minute, and sometimes you see a shadowy figure in the corner, and you hear whatever those voices, there's sweet nothings. It's saying nothing essentially, but they're voices. And I did my research on it, and it's lack of sleep, right? Your brain is still awake when you're asleep. So
yeah, like I was saying, it's not a lack of sleep. Okay, that's a spiritual occurrence. One is experiencing when you're experiencing, sleep paralysis, and you see shadowy figures in your room, or you feel a heavy pressure, a heavy weight on your chest. Sometimes you can discern that, this is actually a spirit, this is actually an entity that is, putting pressure on me. All right. That's not because of lack of sleep. There's no, Edomite scientific breakdown. All right. That you can give that's going to explain, those events. But again, Esau loves to he loves to shroud, these things, that happen upon the earth. He has to shroud them, and in scientific breakdowns. This is not a thing, where you can just say this is a lack of sleep, or this is because you ate, a particular thing, before you went to bed, or so on and so forth. No, this is a spiritual occurrence. What I'm trying to say is Esau never likes to acknowledge, the spiritual realm. Okay? And he knows, he does know that the spiritual realm exists. All right? Because, hey, they represent the left-hand side. All right? So they've picked a side. They know that, there is both sides, and both sides are definitely in existence, but they've picked their side. But they would have the people, the sheep, who believe that, that whole spiritual side of things, is non-existent. Again, that's why it's so beautiful to be illuminated, with this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Okay, because then you know what's happening. When you experience sleep paralysis, you know exactly what you're going through. And like I said, it removes the fear aspect of the experience. Just like, in the world, you might fear death because you might believe, there's a hell. All right, you might believe that, there's this blackness or whatever the case may be. But then when you come into this truth, you understand that, hold on, there's a spiritual realm, and I'm going to go back to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Shem Yahushai, and I'm going to be judged, and I'm going to come back down upon the earth. You understand the process. And like it says in the Apocrypha, concerning death, this is the sentence over all flesh. Okay, so this truth removes the aspect of fear, from a lot of things when you have the true understanding. But again, these individuals in the world, they don't know what they're experiencing. All right, so they will Google it, they'll research it, and they'll get the Edomite breakdown of what these things are. All right. And hey, this guy, these celebrities, as we know, mass majority of them, have sold out. All right. Mass majority of them is sold out, especially, on this guy's level. When you're talking about the Weeknd, Drake, all of these celebrities, they have sold out. So it's no surprise that they be getting visited, by, these type of spirits, all right? Because they've had to do things and compromise themselves on a very, very high level, in order to obtain the position that they have in this world. All right?
That was my biggest medicine for it. It's just turn your phone off, turn the TV off, turn all the lights off, you won't get it. I usually get it when I leave a light on.
Really?
Yeah, because
silhouette.
Your brain is kind of still awake.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
So the irony is it's gotta all be dark and scary for you to sleep through the night.
I've never had sleep paralysis, but it's horrifying. Yeah. I find the idea.
Right. So, the first scripture that came to my mind, was in Job. This is Job, chapter 4, and we'll start from verse 13. And it reads, "In the thoughts from the visions of the night, when deep sleep falleth on men, fear came upon me, and trembling, which made all my bones to shake. Then a spirit passed before my face, the hair of my flesh stood up." All right, so spirits, visit people, man. Okay, you have all kind of, encounters, in the Holy Scriptures that make reference to spiritual, encounters concerning, men, women, being visited by spirits. These things happen. It can happen when you're fully awake, it can happen when you're asleep, half asleep, so on and so forth. Now it says here in the NLT, "A spirit swept past my face and my hair stood on end." Back to the KJV, "It stood still, but I could not discern the form thereof. An image was before mine eyes. There was silence, and I heard a voice saying, Shall mortal man be more than just God? Shall a man be more pure than his maker?" All right? So in the NLT, it said, "The spirit stopped, but I couldn't see its shape. There was a form before my eyes. In the silence, I heard a voice say." All right? So that's how it be a lot of the time. You see these shadowy figures, You might just see someone standing in your room, in the corner. Or sometimes, again, you can be fully awake. You can sense something around you. You might look. You might see, for a split second, and then it disappears. All right? Because, hey, the spiritual realm is real. And as we get, closer and closer to the end of this man's kingdom, these things are going to start manifesting and increasing on a huge scale. All right? The scriptures speak about monstrous, apparitions in the Apocrypha. All right? So people are going to completely bug out when the Lord, starts really turning things up on a spiritual level. And again, it reminds me of, and I think the apostles mentioned this a few months ago, 3 or 4 months ago at the camp. It reminds me of, Ghostbusters, man. The old school Ghostbusters, the film. You got that scene where, all of them spirits are just like let loose in Babylon. All them wacky spirits and, in their various different shapes and forms. And you had that huge painting. There was one scene with a huge painting, of this man with grey hair. And it started talking, and I believe he ended up actually coming outside of the picture. I was terrified of that film when I was young. When I was really young, watching that. I was like, damn, But again, being in this truth, you understand these things. All right? And you understand that, hey, in the kingdom, we're going to have command over all the spirits. We're going to have command over all the spirits, man. All right? But I'm going to cut it off there, Lord willing. This brief lesson has been edifying, and until next time, I'll say shalom.